Okay, how to write a letter to the police. That's what I'm going to call this video. And the reason I'm going to call that is that's what I've done. I've written a letter to the police. I totally forgot to do the intro. Hi everybody, this is John here, obviously. Now, the basic skill of writing a letter and addressing it is sort of a lost art because nobody writes letters anymore. But the thing is, if you want to communicate to a public official or a politician or a public figure of some kind, you have about 100 times more likely, better chance of getting their attention and having them actually read what you wrote if you send an old style paper mailed through the postal system letter than if you tweet at them or send them an email. This paper gets people's attention. It will land on their desk. It will need to be opened and read. Maybe by a staff member, but also maybe by the person you're actually addressing. So instead of just sending an email, I've written a letter. Now, if you want to write a letter, the way you do it is there's 2 addresses on an envelope. You might know this, but lots of people don't write letters and they don't know this, so bear with me. This address in the middle is where it's going, so to whoever you're writing the thing to. And there's another address in the corner here. That's your address. That's so that they can write you a letter back if they, feel like it. But I'm going to read you the letter that's going to get sent tomorrow. I wrote it too late to get it to the post office tonight, so it's going to go to the post office in the morning. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to give you a little preamble of why I'm writing this letter in the first place. So I'm going to just read you a little description of what's going on here. Brenda Lucki, the Trudeau-appointed Commissioner of Canada's RCMP, last week issued a public request to Canadian citizens to report to the RCMP any incidents they saw of their friends, their co-workers, and their neighbours voicing criticism of the government or of Canadian law enforcement. Based on commentary without citation of a named source within the RCMP, from the Ottawa online news site blacklocks.ca, the RCMP have previously praised a non-passed piece of legislation called Bill C-36, which would create the penalties of house arrest and up to $70,000 in fines for completely legal criticism and commentary that was simply deemed offensive. In other words, a law that would allow legal and financial penalties for non-crimes. When in doubt, report it, according to Blacklock's reporter. Now, obviously, Canada's federal police force cannot enforce a controversial parliamentary bill that never made it into law, not at least without being immediately recognized as no longer a conventional police force at all. And if we have an organization that was once our national police force and is now degrading itself to be no more than armed enforcers operating completely outside the framework of any constitutionally valid legal code, then we'd all be in a state of actual kinetic warfare and not having a civilized discussion at all. So quite obviously what Brenda Lucki meant by her comments was not that she should be immediately fired or prosecuted for enforcing arbitrary half-baked ideas that are not laws, because that would mean she was operating about 1,000 miles outside of her authority as a commissioner of the federal police force, and instead she'd be, running some sort of private mercenary palace guard outfit, while still being paid a police commander's salary. And obviously that isn't happening in a first world nation like Canada. So it's quite clear to me that what Brenda Lucki meant when she called on Canadians to inform the RCMP when they observed their friends and neighbours being critical of the government was that the criminal misbehaviour of the politically successful grifter caste, along with public officials, charlatans, embezzlers, bribe takers, fraud, snake oil salesmen, thieves, and other criminal scum presently occupying the federal, provincial, and municipal offices, are so totally out of control that the RCMP needs your help to proceed with investigations and the recommendation of criminal charges to Crown prosecutors. Brenda Lucki has asked for our help, and we should give it to her. And to that end, I've written the following letter, which I encourage you each to print off for yourself and send by postal mail. Here's the letter. To RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, 73 Leikin Drive, M83512, D, Mail Stop 87, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K1A, 0R2. Dear Royal Canadian Mounted Police Commissioner Brenda Lucki, my name is John Hembling and I'm a Canadian citizen residing in Vancouver, BC. First, I'd like to thank you for your recent request to the public to report complaints against members of our government to your organization, the RCMP. Like you and many other Canadians, I've become increasingly frustrated by what appears to be a rising trend within the federal, provincial, and municipal governments across Canada. I am angry and disgusted by this culture of open contempt for the law by both elected and appointed public officials. This apparent trend seems also to manifest in a culture of casual and open criminal offending by public officials that is possibly facilitated by deliberate non-coverage in the legacy news media, due likely to the payments made to that media from the direction of the Office of the Prime Minister. $600 million was the most recent sum I was aware of, although further payments may have escaped my attention. It is difficult to keep track of the overwhelming volume of corrupt and criminal practice by public officials. To be clear, although a climate of open criminality within our country's public offices is outrageous and shameful in its apprehension, my primary reason for writing this letter is that the offences of bribery, obstructing justice, fraud, public incitement of hatred, and extortion are all offences with victims who suffer, rather than victimless misbehaviours of questionable merit to pursue. Since the scope of our current government's criminal misconduct impacts almost all Canadians and is far too costly and damaging to our country to try calculation, I trust you will treat this with the gravity it merits, recommending an appropriate complement of indictments and charges to the Crown. A few examples already on record where a finding of culpability of the Prime Minister or his staff have already been made are: 1. Accepting bribes from the Aga Khan in the form of island vacation. 2. Accepting bribes from the We Charity in the form of family members getting speaking fees in exchange for replicating an existing federal summer jobs program within the We Charity. 3. Obstructing justice by interfering in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin executive under former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould. 4. Inciting hatred against an identifiable group by claiming they are racist, sexists, and science deniers. 5. Attempting to extort the unwilling cooperation of members of an identifiable group by both inciting hatred against them, as well as unlawfully suspending charter-protected human rights for members of that group. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but as the Commissioner of the RCMP, I thought your request for citizen reporting of anti-government complaints should be treated with the priority and haste that your position as commander of a national police force merits. I hope you'll be able to recommend charges to Crown prosecution for these offences by Mr. Trudeau and his staff, and I look forward to reading news of the progress of the Crown on these as well as other charges. Best regards, and thank you very much for your kind attention to these serious matters. Sincerely, John Hembling. My phone number, my address, and my signature. The text of this, if you want to print it off and send a copy yourself to the Commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, will be linked in the low bar of this video. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, have a lovely day.